Episode 6. This is the Valley's People. Episode 6 to be replayed to be vied.
Welcome again to the Valley's People. This is a program which brings to you people from all parts of the Hunter Valley who've contributed to our lifestyle and have played some part in the formation of the way we live, culturally and sometimes politically, and sometimes just as sheer personalities in their own right. And today we're going to meet a man who's been 6 times president of the Port Stephens Shire, and we're also going to meet a young lady who's been hailed as one of the greats from the Hunter Valley amateur theatres. Hope you can stay for the Valley's People today. Thanks for joining us today for the Valley's People. My first guest is Newcastle born, but that's about all. The rest of his life he's been champion for Port Stephens. Bob Freeman, Councillor Bob Freeman.
Thanks,
Welcome
Ron.
to the Valley's People.
Thank you very much.
Really inside you, that Port Stephens Shire, isn't it?
Ron, I think that it's captured the imagination of not only me, but most of people that live in Newcastle, and the amount of Sydney people that have come to live within Port Stephens in the past 10 years. It's certainly one of the nicest spots in Australia, and certainly a beautiful area to live with a lovely moderate climate and close to facilities such as Newcastle and NBN 3, and we're very proud of it, and we're very protective of it also. It's unique, and I think you hear people that have travelled widely refer as Rio de Janeiro and the Great Lakes systems in England, and it's got it all, I think.
Yeah. There's an enigma or two in it, isn't it? Because when you talk to Sydney people, they talk about going to Port Stephens. You talk to Newcastle people, they talk about going to Nelson's Bay. It's Nelson, isn't it?
It's Nelson Bay, yeah.
Yes, by going to Nelson's Bay. And so it's got something of a split image, but it's truly beautiful, isn't it?
It really is, and I can see it in years to come. Well, at the moment, it's the fastest growing shire in New South Wales, percentage-wise, and our census figures bear that out. Of course, we've only got 20-odd thousand people, and it's not hard to obtain a percentage such as 25% growth rate each year. When you're like Lake Macquarie, and they grow perhaps at a greater number of people each year, but their percentage is a lot less, of course.
Bob, do you think it has a danger of becoming just one giant retirement village? Is that the way it's going or not?
Ron, I think perhaps 10 years ago it was more inclined to have a population of about 50% retired folk and the other half in the workforce and the school-age people. Today I think the balance has tipped the other way. We've got a full high school and a very active police and citizens boys club. And younger people are commuting to work, and our own service facilities that Port Stephens lives on, and despite what anybody might tell you, the biggest industry in Port Stephens Shire, including the RAAF Base, is tourism.
Really? Yes. It strikes me as being a very unique shire because there's so much of the country you don't seem to own as a council.
1/3 of our country,
Really?
Ron.
1/3?
1/3 of it is owned either by the Hunter District Water Board with their water gathering facilities, the RAAF Base with their fighters and the new ones that are coming shortly we're all looking forward to, and of course the Forestry Commission. So 1/3 of our whole 360 square miles is non-rateable, of which the ratepayers are really carrying those public utilities on their back so far as roads and facilities are concerned.
Is it just your love for the Port Stephens Shire that's made you such a controversial councillor and shire president?
Ron, I suppose that the controversial bit's myself, but I certainly love the area, and I think it's got a future that we haven't really touched yet. We're blessed with the best of both worlds, being close to the big city. We have a natural environment which the Water Board helped to protect, that we will never become urbanised thoroughly. We will always have those wonderful areas of greenery. Our floodplain areas with our farming communities will always provide a lovely green belt around Raymond Terrace per se and Williamtown. And the RAAF Base itself also contributes to that that we're never going to be just a sprawling, ever-growing bigger suburb. We will always have an identity that will be hard to replace, I think.
Yes, it struck me, and the reason why I thought it would be interesting to talk to you on this program is that really the Port Stephens Shire is part of the playground of the whole Hunter Valley, isn't it? Anything you do is going to affect people all over the place.
Ron, I think we're being recognised as that exact facility. When I was a little bloke, and I heard you talking earlier about what you did with your holidays, and we were orientated to Lake Macquarie, and I grew up in New Lambton. Today, I don't think it's fair to say that a lot of people go to Lake Macquarie for their holidays. It's become suburbia. Port Stephens, I think, will maintain the holiday image in the day trip and encourage folk to come from throughout New South Wales to spend their leisure time there, and that will continue for a long time in the future.
Do you think the controversy has died now about your efforts to put a topless girl up on the road sign?
That's a few years ago, Ron, but it brings back memories. I can remember our tourist officer, Ted Lewis, coming into the office and saying, Councillor Freeman, we've got the painter down there putting that sign up. And I said, yes. He said, look, what do you think about the idea of leaving the top off? And I said, what a good idea. So we painted it, or the painter painted it, and a couple of days went by without anybody noticing it. So we had to ring, or get somebody to ring one of our councillors that is perhaps not as broad-minded as the general community, and spark off the interest that created all the publicity that we were hopeful it would do when this painter came up with his idea. And it certainly did do that. Put Port Stephens right on the map. Right throughout Australia, it created somewhat of a tongue-in-cheek, very Puritanised-looking council that were really up in arms, or some of the councillors were up in arms about the fact that this sign was painted with the girl without a top.
Well, it was the first council to welcome people with just the bikini pants, wasn't it?
Well, that wasn't really what we were trying to encourage then, but of course the times have changed considerably, and now you can bathe on one of our beaches, especially not only without a top, but without a bottom. Yeah. And it's been blessed by the state government.
Yeah. Well, I guess you could go on any eastern coast beach now, and a topless girl doesn't really attract a sideways glance.
It does off me, but I mean off the general public it's accepted.
Well, I'm glad you were honest, because I was just cheating a little bit. I guess I must look the same way. But that soon was covered up, which is probably a better story than the fact that she was topless in the first place. Certain pressures really won over, didn't they?
Well, Ron, I think it's fair to say that we found such a great advertising gimmick for Port Stephens with the sign that after a month, 2 months went by, and we decided, how can we resurrect this publicity that was so magic? So we decided, and I'd also had some letters from the church groups within the Shire, and I don't know whether elections were coming up or not at that particular time, but I thought it would kill two birds with one stone. It would appease the church groups and create publicity such as we haven't seen before or since for the benefit of Port Stephens. So we painted the top on.
Yeah. It strikes me that you've got in yourself an Australian tent pegging champion and also a Shire president. So how did you get into council from that sort of background?
Ron, quite by accident, really. I was at Maitland Sale Yards chatting with some of the rural community and grizzling about the condition of our rural roads. And I said to Tom, Tom, why don't you stand for council, mate? They're on in a month or two. And he said, look, after a bit of thought, he said, well, you're about half my age. You've always got plenty of yap, so why don't you stand? So with that I did, and I'd say I'd be a rank outsider, and I knocked on all the farming community's doors after some advice as how you go about this politicking. And lo and behold, I was fortunate enough to be elected.
Well, the tent pegging side of you in fact represented Australia in 63 and 1975 and 1979 in South Africa and other places. You were born in a saddle?
No, Ron, I'm there quite by accident also. Some very good friends of mine that also represented Australia, Col Campbell and Les Coxon from within Port Stephens Shire area. They not only taught me how to ride a horse, but also encouraged me to be involved in the tent pegging activities, of which we all learnt together. And our successes surprised us as well as everybody else concerned with the sport. We've had 10 years straight riding at the Sydney Royal Show and won the New South Wales Championships 5 out of 8 times, and 3 trips to South Africa, so it's been very, very kind to us. And I'm not really a horseman, which is, but they managed to find a horse that as kind and gentle and does what I can manage to tell it. And fortunately, I've got a bit of coordination, or I used to have, between eye and hand, and that seems to have stood us instead.
Well, your cricketing days, perhaps, was it?
Probably, Ron, yeah.
Yeah. The duties of Shire President, and apart from the tent pegging, time that must consume, you've also got, of course, ratepayers to appease. How does the Shire President manage in such a large area financially?
Well, I personally didn't manage very well, as I'm sure Councillor Mackenzie, who took over from me, I can be perfectly honest and say I didn't pay any tax for the years that I've been Shire President, through no fault of mine that I didn't, or that I had some cunning trust scheme or something. It's just that you don't make enough income, and by the time that you are, if you do the job as to the best of your ability, which I'm sure all Shire Presidents do, doesn't leave you much time to, certainly you couldn't work for an employee from 9 till 5, and to run your own business it would also be very difficult.
I wasn't trying to abuse confidentiality there, really, but there are a lot of critics, aren't there, against council, Shire cars and money for councillors and money for presidency. I was just wondering just how you got out of that.
Well, that's a bit of a cross you carry, I think. I think it applies to federal parliamentarians as well. I think if we paid federal parliamentarians $200,000 a year, we might get a better quality than we get at the moment, which applies to state parliamentarians and also councillors. Councillors receive, it's an honorary job, really, but you can't, the people such as the Lord Mayor of Newcastle and Shire President can't give up their whole feeding their family attitude and devote all their time, so there's got to be some reimbursement to them, of which is only a pittance when you take them. Most of them are of exceptional ability in some way or another, excluding myself, and to give away their time for a 12-month period, who feeds the family?
Yeah. Well, Bob, the answer came as I suspected, I must admit, because I didn't see you being in it, being the person you are, either for the money or just for the ego trip, but rather because of the fact that you love the Port Stephens Shire. And congratulations on that, and thank you very much for being with us today.
Pleasure, Ron. Thank you.
The Valley's people, in just a moment, I have another very interesting guest. Welcome back to the Valley's people. I guess we'd all agree it's not easy to win an award these days, whether it be in sport or some cultural endeavour. And I'm very pleased that the Condor Award for the best performance of a female actress has been won by our next guest. That's the Condor Award. Nola Wallace, welcome to the Valley's people.
Hello, Ron.
Not easy to win an award like that, is it?
No, it isn't, Ron. It takes a lot of hard work and dedication.
Yeah. Amateur theatre is something in some ways quite unique to the Hunter Valley, isn't it? Because we're very strong on amateur theatre and not so strong on professional theatre. It seems to be the reverse of a lot of other places.
Well, that's true, Ron. We have quite a few amateur groups, both musical and rep type groups. And all their members are very, very avid workers for their groups. And some of us move from one group to another. But we have a very deep conviction about amateur theatre. And over the years, it's improved. Our whole performance and attitude has improved so much, mainly because I think our audiences have matured as well, and they expect more from us now.
Well, in your own case, some of the critics said that your own acting is no different to that of a professional.
Yes.
You've no thoughts of turning professional?
Oh, and I'm very happy because I'm doing what I want to do, Ron.
Yeah.
And I've been very fortunate with the people that I've worked with the plays that I've been in. Because you don't do this sort of thing on your own, you know. I'm very fortunate that I've had the lead roles in many shows, but without a director to get whatever you have inside of you out, without the people that you perform to and who give you something to build your character on, you know, you're on your own otherwise. And teamwork is very important in theatre, I think.
You seem to go for the jackpot every time because you pull out some very difficult roles. Now, there's Aldonzo of Man of La Mancha.
Oh, yes.
You're hardly a sweet young girl, is she?
No, she was quite a challenge for me. Just physically, it was quite a challenge because of the physical contact between me and the 5 men that I played opposite. Unfortunately, with Man of La Mancha, when the advertising started, everybody could only remember the rape scene. And of course, you know, it gets a little bit...
It was a gangbang, really, wasn't it?
Yes, well,
5
really,
or 7?
it was like 7.
7, yeah.
Yes. And it isn't the only scene. It is the most violent scene in the play, and the menace that's there, it really got to me, because each night I used to get this terrible feeling that, oh dear, you know, what if I was in this situation? And it made me very much aware that there are women today who still live in this similar situation, who still have this sort of experience, and it's very frightening.
Did you have to talk to any rape victims before you went?
No, I didn't go quite that far, but...
Well, how does a housewife with 3 children cope with being raped on stage for each performance?
Well, again, I've got to tell you that it's the people I work with. My director, Don McEwen, was simply marvellous, as were the five or six fellows that I was working with. We had many sessions just together, just talking things out, and we had tremendous respect for one another, but it was just cutting off from being ourselves to taking on the character. That was the difficult thing. Once we got over that difficulty, the rest just flowed.
Then there was Seduction of a different form too in 7 Year Itch, wasn't there?
Yes. Yes, that was a delightful play, and it is one of my favourites. Though, as you can see, I'm no Marilyn Monroe, and I didn't try to be. But the comedy in the play is different from the film, and in that I played literally 4 characters, because there were 3 dream sequences where I became somebody else, and then there was the character that I was playing of the girl. And we had some rather hair-raising, and I mean hair-raising, incidents in that, because in one dream sequence I had to wear a very long red wig and carry a candelabra with the candles alight. And I thought this was a great scene because for the first time I had to be seductive, you know, and I was sort of being seductive walking across the stage with this candelabra, and people in the wings were sort of making frantic gestures to me, and I could smell something burning and couldn't for the life of me think what it was. And all of a sudden I could see out of the corner of my eye that my wig was smouldering.
Oh, no.
And my leading man, who was supposed to respond to me being seductive, was bashing me on the shoulder like this, trying to get my hair, you know, from burning.
Yeah, I don't know how you do respond to a flaming wig. I mean, no, it's beyond any man to do that, isn't it?
Well, look, you just, all of a sudden it's just important for the play. You know, your personal safety goes out the window, and you think the play's got to go on. And that really is true. The show must go on regardless of what happens.
Yes. It's interesting to think that amateur theatre can provide those sort of needs to the community, take on ambitious projects like that in the Hunter Valley.
Well, Ron, that is one of the great things about amateur theatre in Newcastle. I don't think we've ever been frightened to tackle difficult projects. Man of La Mancha is one example. The Rep Theatre this year had a season of a Shakespearean play. Now, 10 years ago, they would not have done that.
No.
They're very adventurous because they get a professional producer up at least once a year, and their group has learnt so much from the technical side of theatre, the craft, learning how to move, to walk, to sit, and they're the things that if you don't move with people who know what they're about, you don't learn those things. I mean, I've been fortunate. I've worked with people.
Might I add to that also to sing, because you had a starring role of Dame Nellie Melba, didn't you, in Toast to Nellie Melba?
Yes, that was wonderful. That was just so marvellous, again, because of the people I worked with. Rob Page at the university asked me if I would play Nellie Melba. I mean, that's like... that's the greatest invitation that anyone could get, and I had doubts about being able to do that because I had to learn about 20 bars from 2 pieces from opera, Lucia de Lammermoor, and I can't think what the other one is. It just got...
Had you sung opera before?
No, I've never sung opera before. And again, my singing teacher helped me with that, and but that was a marvellous exercise and wonderful experience.
What a mixed bag comes out of Nola Wallace, because you're talking about Nellie Melba and opera, and then Irene, you were the Irish young girl.
Yes. Oh, that was wonderful. That was a real fun show. It took a lot of work. We did it all in 10 weeks, and we had a brilliant musical director in Barry Connell, who now is conducting the Newcastle City Choir, and Ken Mantle was our producer, who is very well known in the Newcastle area, and I'd worked with Ken before, and it was just so marvellous. and a tremendous choreographer in Doreen Carr, who sort of came out of retirement to do our choreography, and it was a wonderful thing.
Yes, Nola, I'm not just searching for a headline, but I want to go back to that rape scene because I know that you are a Sunday school teacher.
Yes, that's right.
And we know also that there are some wowsers in the community, both in and out of the church in many ways. How did you cope with that? What were people saying when you went to Sunday school?
Well, I didn't find it any problem so much with people at my church because they've always supported me, and always I've had tremendous help from people at my church, and they did ask me how I coped with it because it was such a contrast to my normal life, but there was no problem there. But other people away from that environment, exactly...
Who didn't know you.
Who didn't know me very well. For instance, one person said that instead of wearing a flesh-coloured costume, you see, in the rape scene I had my skirt ripped off me and I was wearing a full-body stocking and goodness knows what else underneath. And I was asked by a couple of people why I didn't wear black leotards.
Really?
Yes.
Marilyn Monroe's worn body stockings.
Yes.
Yes. Isn't that incredible?
It is incredible.
They don't see you as being two people, both Nola Wallace and also a stage actress.
I don't think so. And also with Man of La Mancha, I don't think at that stage people really were looking at the show as a whole, because it is a development of an idea. I mean, our Donza is a woman who, she's a whore. She has no high ideals at all. Along comes this man, this Don Quixote, and tells her that she's beautiful, that she has a lovely character, that there is really something worthy there. And all of a sudden she starts to believe it. And the rape scene is meant to demoralise her completely, so that the men try to sort of point out to her that there's no way you can change. And in the end of the story, she does. And she is a different person. And that's the most important thing.
Almost like Eliza Doolittle, isn't it? Back in the 1600s. Yes. What else, apart from a housewife, mother, stage actress, award winner, what else occupies your time? Well,
I teach speech and drama, and I'm going to be teaching some deaf children speech, and that's going to be a very challenging occupation. So I have a studio at home where I teach about 20 students I have now.
Yes. It never ceases to fascinate me when you start talking to people about their interests and their careers, and then you ask another question just sort of out of the blue, as I did then, and you find a whole other motivation, other side to them, where they really want to assist their fellow human being. I think that's probably something unique in our valley too, also.
Well, I think people in the Hunter Valley are very concerned with other than themselves, and I think this is apparent by the people that are here in this Hunter Valley, and it's not only in theatre, it's everywhere. And it's a very gratifying thing to see.
Yes, well, it's gratifying that I should be talking to an award winner. Congratulations.
Thank you,
it's a marvellous award. It's also, I guess, thanks to the City Council for being up there at the forefront and recognising that sort of thing.
Well, I think the Condra Awards are marvellous because for that reason, because the arts have not been recognised publicly by a group like the council, and if it does nothing else, it puts the arts on an equal footing to sport in this city, and that is very important because the arts are very important for our personal development as well as sport.
Okay, well again, congratulations, Nola Wallace, and thank you for working with the deaf children and teaching drama and speech and all the other things which can make another side of a magnificent personality.
Thank you, Ron.
Thank you. And I'll be back just to wind off today's episode of The Valley's People in just a moment. Well, another two outstanding people from the Hunter Valley in our Valley's People program today. Councillor Bob Freeman of the Port Stephens Shire, 6 times president of that shire, and also Nola Wallace, who's doing so much to further the cause in amateur theatre right throughout Newcastle. I hope you can join us again for another program when we meet 2 more interesting guests from this valley in the Valley's People. Goodbye for now.